والصلاة والسلام على سيد الحق أجمعين أبو القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Yesterday I spoke about the issue of social media and how it can be dangerous to not only the youth but to all Muslims and indeed all of society. Today I want to talk about the benefits of using social media and the ways in which we can use it to spread Islam and the message of Islam. So, the first question we need to ask ourselves, how do we make social media Islamic? The first step to making social media something Islamic is to make it into an act of worship. Any action which you do in this world can be transformed into ibadah, into worship based on your intention. So, if you want to post, for example, on your Facebook account because you want followers or you want likes or you want views, then as we mentioned yesterday, your action is restricted to only gaining a benefit from this world and from this dunya. However, if you use your Facebook, your Instagram, YouTube accounts in order to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to guide other people into the true path of Islam, then of course this is something you will be rewarded for in the akhirah. Of course, the intention or the niyyah behind something is not sufficient. You can't rely just on the intention. The action itself which is committed must also be within the limits of Islam. And who is better in speech than who calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my Lord is Allah, does righteous deeds and says, I am one of the Muslims. This is the Quranic ayah which we can base this entire discussion of using social media to our advantage on. One of the benefits then that we can take from social media and from the internet is that we can seek knowledge through social media. We can seek education about Islam. Islamic knowledge used to be something which was very difficult to acquire. People used to have to travel to different cities such as Qom, such as Najaf in order to study in the houses there. And they would have to spend money in order to get to these places, exert their efforts and strength. However, now we have been blessed with the introduction of the internet and social media with a wealth of knowledge at our very fingertips. We are, in a way, fortunate that we have these unlimited resources, these unlimited books, scriptures translated into so many different languages to help us seek closeness to Allah and to understand the religion of Islam in a more intricate, sophisticated and deeper way. So we need to capitalize and we need to utilize this luxury that we have. Instead of aimlessly scrolling through your phone, watching pointless videos and watching TikToks and YouTube videos about random things, allow your phone, allow your social media to connect you more to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and less with the dunya and this world. There are so many different apps which you can use which can grant you Islamic knowledge. For example, there is an app which is completely in English called Thaqalain Hadith Library. What this app is, it is an app for people who are English speakers, who want to learn more about the ahadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. In this app, we have various different Shia and Islamic books that have been translated into English. For example, we have al-Kafi, we have al-Tawheed, we have Kitab al-Ghayba, we have Fada'il al-Shia, we have Kamil al-Ziyarah. We have so many other books written by our most famous scholars such as Sheikh al-Mufid, Sheikh al-Sadur, translated into English. The entirety of these books have been translated. So sometimes you will have people who come and they'll say, well, the religion of Islam and learning more about Islam and learning about ahadith is something which is not accessible to us and therefore we'll just sit and do our own thing. You have these apps which are free to download. Anyone just now can go and download it, and you have the entirety of Al-Kafi, for example, all however many volumes there are, translated into your language for you to read. We have the Maraja and the ulama's websites, for example, such as Sayyid Sistani's website or Sayyid Khamenei's website, which has not only translations into English but into about 10 different languages, whether that is Spanish, Persian, Urdu, German, French. We have sheikhs and scholars, for example, who have YouTube channels and playlists on every single topic which you can imagine. There are some sheikhs who, in English, will deliver a 10-part series on how to pray, for example, or about the environment, or about politics, or about modern day issues like LGBT, about feminism, or about Islamic finance, or even about mental health. Everything is there for us. Everything to do with Islam is at our fingertips. All we need to do is search up and we find it. We cannot accept to have a lack of Islamic knowledge. We cannot be ignorant and senseless when it comes to our religion and when it comes to our faith. When it is so easy for us to access everything about this. And when we could be spending hours reading this, when we could be spending an hour, for example, at night reading Fada'il al-Shi'a or Kamil al-Ziyarat before you go to Ziyarah and learning about the merits of Ziyarah, you could easily be reading this instead of watching YouTube. But this is what we spoke about yesterday, the dangers of social media and how it can draw you away from this knowledge, this vast pool of knowledge that we have, into watching pointless things for likes and for views. If, for example, you can sit through a 40-minute documentary on Netflix about a cartoon or about a made-up TV show, then you should be able to dedicate twice that amount of time to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what? For the sake of your own soul. You can replace the music you have on Spotify or on YouTube, for example, with Quran. You can download lectures on a podcast and nourish your iman on your commute to school or to work. You know, our scholars and Muslims who lived, for example, in Iraq over 30, 40 years ago, they didn't have this luxury of being able to, whenever they left the house, listen to a muhadara or listen to Quran or al-Tamimi in their ears whilst they walked. They didn't have the opportunity to gain knowledge at every point during the day. We have this. We are privileged. So we need to utilize it, and we can't be of the lazy people who accept ignorance and who accept to not be educated in the matters of religion. Something interesting that you'll see is that even the enemies of Islam use this knowledge of Islam through social media more than Muslims do. You know, there was a very famous and high-ranking sheikh who came out and he said that the Zionists, for example, and the American government have done more research online about Imam Mahdi than 99% of the Shiites have. These enemies, these people who work against Islam, that we can clearly see, they know more about Islam, they know more about the Imams, they know more about the Ahlul Bayt, and especially about Imam Mahdi than we do. Why? Because they spent their time researching, what is this man? What can he bring? How do we challenge it? And this was only through social media. This was only through the internet and online access to these books. And so we as Muslims need to up our game. We need to up our game and put our efforts in life into educating ourselves as the Holy Quran demands, as its first commandment. So, how do we use social media to propagate Islam, to spread Islam to our own advantage? We mentioned that there are enemies of Islam who are using social media to work against us. So how do we use social media in our own favor to spread Islam as far as possible? We have different things. We have traditional media, such as the TV or newspapers or the radio. Now, traditional media is one way. This means that it's a form of communication where someone has a closed system and they have content created by themselves. Professionals create this type of media. And this type of system can put forward whatever message it wants to. It can have an agenda and push this agenda in whichever way it wants. Rather than allowing people to discuss what is going to be put out into the world, these people choose one path which fits their mindset and they push it out. No one is allowed to criticize or debate or discuss it. You are fed information, full stop. On the other hand, when we have social media, what does this allow for us to do? It allows for people to have discussions, it allows for people to have debates and open conversations where anyone in the world is able to push out content and put out their own message. These platforms, which allow open conversations and allow for people to have discussions and debates, opens the door for these discussions to take place. And what is the result of this? The result of this is that it provides an opportunity to challenge what is being said by the traditional media without having to be as big or powerful as them. For example, in past years, if the media wanted to push a narrative, say for example about al-Tamimi, they would have to have a lot of money to be able to put this onto multiple different channels for as many people to see it. However, now if someone wants to promote al-Tamimi to the entire world, it can be anyone in this room. All they need to do is upload a video of al-Tamimi, put a small message, click tweet, and ask a few people to share it. Within a day or two, perhaps 1, 2, 3 million people can see what you have put. This is the effect of social media. And this is favourable. This is something of benefit to those who don't usually have a chance to present their own views, the people who are put aside by the traditional media. Let me give you a practical example so you understand what I'm talking about. The conflict between Israel and Palestine. In the last couple of years, we can use it as an example which highlights the importance of social media by those who struggle against what the traditional media used to say to the entire world. Over the last 10, 20, 30 years, the Zionists intensified the censoring of media whenever they would attack Gaza, for example. Whenever there was an attack, the Zionists would control the media narrative and say that we are being attacked, therefore we have to defend ourselves. They would control what the entire world would see about this conflict. However, in 2014, there was a change in this. How was there a change? There was a change because at that point, billions of people had started using social media. And the effect of this was that Palestinians who lived in Gaza would take a video of an airstrike coming and killing children in front of them. And all they would do is put this out into the world, and millions of people began to share it. Millions of people began to see what is happening in front of them. When this happened, and when people who had only previously listened to, for example, BBC News or Sky News, their mindset had previously been Palestine is attacking Israel, Israel must defend itself. Now they can see that bombs are being dropped on Palestinian children. In their mind, they know something is not wrong with what they've previously been told. They are now witnessing the truth from people who have no agenda. These people are experiencing it themselves. And as the bombs started going down on Palestine, people on Twitter started to put a hashtag. They wrote hashtag Gaza under attack. Now, anyone then in the West, someone in Glasgow, someone in London goes onto Twitter, they see this hashtag, they click on it, they see 100 videos of children in Palestine being killed. People then around the world started to protest. They went to the streets in London, Paris, Berlin, Madrid, everywhere across the world. People began to protest. They said, this is not right. There is oppression being done here and we don't stand for it. The amount of protests had never been seen before. Why? Because people were not aware of it. Through social media, they began to become aware of what's happening around them in the world. And for the first time, as people in Gaza, for example, were sending second by second updates of what was happening, the entire world began to listen to them. The entire world began to see the truth, began to see the haqq. And the enemy, of course, tried to fight this back on social media, but they failed. The hashtag that I mentioned managed to gain 4 million tweets on Twitter. Then the Israelis came and made their own hashtag, and this only had 200,000. The people on haqq managed to dominate the powerful, the rich, countries, companies, corporations. How is this possible? Previously, if you had no money, if you had no influence in the media, your story would never be told. Now, the voices of children being bombed by airplanes. A plane which costs 200, 300 million pounds, the narrative of that government is being put aside by a 10-year-old kid in Palestine. So from this, you need to see how it's essential that we use social media to our advantage, that we push our message of Islam, that we defend the oppressed people, whether that's in Palestine, Nigeria, Afghanistan, Yemen, all of these places. You have the ability to reach out to someone on the other side of the world who doesn't know what's going on and change their mind and show them what's happening. Some countries, for example, in the Asian world, maybe Indonesia, Malaysia, they don't hear much apart from what their media tells them. They might think Saudi Arabia is a country where people go to Hajj and it's a Muslim country. They're not aware of what happens in Yemen. When you put a tweet out and it reaches that person, they see, oh my God, this is what that country is doing to Muslims? And their mindset and their views change and they become aware and they start to stand for the truth. So nowadays, we are faced, as we mentioned, with a new type of danger towards Muslims and Islam and what we stand for. Previously, we only had the tactics of what you can call a hard war. Whereas now we have something called a soft war tactic, pushed against Muslims and against Islam. The hard war or the hard power is visible type of power. For example, the people with money, the people who have armies, the people who have weapons, they used to invade countries and kill people. This is the hard warfare. The soft warfare means getting into people's heads, educating them, telling them what to think, brainwashing them. This new type of warfare is so much more dangerous and influential than previously. Now, if you have the ability to change someone's mind and to get into their mind and control what they think, you can rule the entire world. This is why every side fights to control the soft war, to be the one who is most on top of debates, of discussions, of open conversations. This means that you need to present new ideas and spread our beliefs, spread the beliefs of Islam in a convincing way. The enemies of Islam, in reality, do not have new ideas to show off. They do not have logic. They do not have intellect. They might be smart in terms of the way in which they utilize these methods. However, they have no substance behind it. They are extremely poor at getting into the minds of people. All they know how to do is to bully people and to force beliefs and ideas upon them. And so it's our duty to not only push this agenda, but to learn about it. As I mentioned, there are apps, Thaqalain Hadith Library, where you can read all the beliefs of the Shia. Learn them first and then put them out into the world so that people are exposed to this. If someone, for example, sees one of the narrations from Amir al-Mu'mineen, are they going to just scroll by it? No, the beauty is captivating in it. If you expose people to this, then you expose them to the ideas of Haqq, you expose them to the ideas of true Muhammadan Islam. Now, social media, the internet, what does the ulama and the scholars say about it? We have different rulings from our scholars which explain and which tell us the correct way to behave and to have dialogue when we are using the internet or when we are online on social media, for example. And we look to these scholars, we look to these ulama for our guidance in everyday matters and when we need help and when we need advice. So, in regard to social media and the way we use it, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Saeed al-Hakim says that when you're speaking to people online, when you are using social media and when you are talking to people, he says there is no doubt that the dialogue with people from which good is expected is mustahab, is recommended to speak to these people who can bring you good. It might even become wajib upon you to speak to these people since you are promoting the truth and raising the truth higher, or defending the truth and preventing the attacks of the enemies against it. Ayatollah al-Hakim says, it may even become wajib upon you to use social media to join with like-minded people, like-minded Muslims, in spreading Islam and the true version of Islam. One of the last points I want to mention is that we need to keep the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam alive through social media. We can make use of it, as we've been discussing this entire lecture, of social media. And we need to make the most common message that we spread the message of Muharram, the message of Ashura, the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the message of Islam. When we do this, aside from everything that we spoke about today, we can make use of one of the lessons of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam and how he kept the memory of Ashura continuing onwards for generations to come. Our duty as followers of the Imams, as followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, is to continue on this message that Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam enacted for us. Shaheed Mutahari says that for the person who wants to serve Islam, every single moment in their day-to-day lives is an opportunity. However, these types of opportunity differ from one to another. Some people, when they looked at Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, they saw that because he didn't revolt with the sword and because he didn't start a war against alaykum salam, because he didn't start a war after the death of his noble father, that this meant that the occasion of Ashura had been forgotten about. They said that Imam Zain al-Abidin's forgotten about this because he stayed quiet. He didn't go out to war against them. But this was not the case. Rather, it was the opposite. What Imam Zain al-Abidin tried to do was he tried through every means possible to eternalize the memory and the legacy of his father, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Our duty today as Shias of the Imams is to follow their lead, to propagate their messages and their ideals. And when we have this opportunity at our fingertips, every moment of every day, every single night, why do so many of us neglect it? Why are we not using our social media to post quotes about the Imams? Why are we not using social media to spread their ideals, their akhlaq, their messages? Why don't we, for example, show and promote the acts of kindness done by the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen online? Why don't we show the acts of kindness done in the name of Islam and the beauty of our faith to non-Muslims, for example? If we forget to mention the struggles of the Prophet, of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, especially of figures like Al-Hussein and Al-Zahra, then we are not from the Shia, because we are letting their legacy and their memory die out. If we forget them and don't use our platforms to spread their messages, then we become like the Muslims who forgot about the tragedy of Ashura, who forgot about the tragedy of Fadak. We don't want to become Muslims like this. Just quickly at the end, one of the important ways in which we can use social media is to connect with family. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was asked concerning it, and he said, be careful of your duty to Allah, by whom you demand one of another your rights, and to the ties of the relationship. This is a verse from the Holy Quran. Imam al-Sadiq says in regards to the ayah, this means the family relationship. Surely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained for it to be regarded so highly and magnified. Do you not observe that He has mentioned it Himself? Yesterday I mentioned that it is important to put aside our phones and to put aside social media when it comes to spending time with the family. However, on the other hand, I'm aware that people have families back home in Iraq, for example. And it is important that we use social media to keep in contact with them and we do not neglect our relationship with them. This prevents a breakdown in the family relationships and ties, and Islam, above all, commands being good to one another, especially to parents and to relatives. Acting against their wishes or not loving them and giving them the attention they require is a sin. And a believer should never annoy or sever his relationship with his relatives and with his family members. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, sometimes a man might have 3 years of his life left, but because he observed his family ties appropriately, Allah extends his life by 30 more years. And on the other hand, a man might have 33 years of his life left, but because he did not observe his family ties properly, Allah will shorten his life by 30 years. This shows the importance then of using social media in order to connect with family. So, lastly, to conclude, We need to be a key to goodness and not to evil. We need to use social media to encourage other people to do good, to inspire other people to become believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to use it as a means of guiding people to the true path. The leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran addressed the youth, especially in Western countries, a few years ago. Sayyid Khamenei, he said, "I address you, the youth, not because I disregard your parents, rather because I see the future of this world to lie in your hands and the quest for truth to be more alive and conscious in your hearts. I do not address the politicians and the statesmen either, because I believe they have deliberately separated politics from honesty and truth." The leader of the Islamic Revolution addresses the youth because he says the future of change is amongst your people. You are the ones who have to make use of social media, for example, to spread Islam, to spread the truth. So we need to make sure our entire focus and use of social media and the internet is for the sake of benefiting Islam and of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's important that we do not understate the importance of using social media to do this. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala.